It's happening again. The Blue Jays are about to enter the sweepstakes for a star player for the second offseason in a row. And I cannot wait for this ride. So we'll break it down and much more on this episode of Jays Digest. Welcome in, everybody, to Jays Digest. I'm your host, Peter Vryonis, alongside host Nick Gosse. And Nick, it's happening again. The Blue Jays, they're rumored, they're penciled into the Juan Soto sweepstakes. And may happen, may not happen, but hey, they have a legitimate chance this time, and they're going to throw all of their eggs into this basket. Maybe that'll be to the dismay of Chris Bassett yet again, but they're in on this. And even the notable reporters are saying that the Blue Jays are a team to keep an eye on in the mix. Now, it's always the Yankees. The Yankees have the advantage of having him in their backyard for the entire summer and showing him the Yankee way. And that's going to work to their advantage once the offseason rolls around. And depending on how they do in the playoffs, it might not even be a question of whether or not he returns to the Yankees. But as of right now, the Blue Jays are one of the few select teams that are in the conversation for Juan Soto. And if there was ever a player to turn around your franchise after a very abysmal season, it would probably be him.
Yeah, and we saw last offseason the infamous, we'll say, Blue Jays Otani sweepstakes, and it seems like something like that's going to be happening again. And we knew a couple weeks ago a report dropped from John Heyman. Basically, he had the Jays in the top five landing spots for Juan Soto, and the Mets and Yankees were 1 and 2. But today, a brand new report dropped from Bob Nightingale, and he said he's most likely signing with the New York Yankees or New York Mets, although the Toronto Blue Jays and perhaps the Giants will all at least make an attempt. And again, most reports, you can see him here saying he's signing with the Yankees or Mets, which is a New York team in all likelihood. But Peter, we saw this with Otani, and if you rewind back, and I'm not saying it's the same situation, during the season last year, there was some sprinklings of rumors from guys like Bob Nightingale, John Heyman, hinting at the Jays making a push, and ultimately the Jays were the finalists before obviously Otani signed in Los Angeles. But it's bringing back memories, but this is now the second report indicating that the Jays are going, or at least going to try to go after Juan Soto. And I mean, it makes all the sense in the world. We'll have to see as the offseason starts to get closer and closer and inches closer and closer what some of the Blue Jays reporters have to say about this. But I have no doubt in my mind that the Jays are going to make a very, very strong attempt at Juan Soto. And this is the second report now in the span of a few weeks that has linked the Jays to Soto. And we might have an Otani situation, although at a bit of a smaller magnitude given the level of player that Otani was just globally, but for the Blue Jays this year.
Yeah, the Otani stuff was fun until it wasn't,
Yeah.
up until the very end. And that was a whirlwind of emotions, right? We got bamboozled and we thought that he was coming home to Toronto, and ultimately it didn't end up happening. Yeah, it might be on a smaller scale here, but I feel like the Blue Jays may have a better chance. And I'll explain why. Now, he's good friends with Vladimir Guerrero Jr., who is undoubtedly the face of the franchise right now. So they're both Dominican. They're both kind of rose up through the Major League Baseball ranks together. Like they were both kind of hand in hand in terms of prospect rankings and whatnot. So there's that as well. And the proximity, like it's not a drastic change from what Juan Soto is used to, which is the East Coast. So Otani was always a West Coast guy. He signed with the Angels because he wanted to be able to have people in Japan watch his games. The time difference isn't as drastic as it is in the East Coast, and maybe that was a reason as well why he wanted to stay in LA, but be competitive as well with the Dodgers. So yeah, maybe the Blue Jays were finalists, but we know that finalists doesn't really get you anything. Maybe you're talked about for a couple of weeks after the fact that it happened, but you're just known as the first loser pretty much. So the Jays, although they don't have a great chance, I don't think, of getting Juan Soto because the Yankees have every advantage that we listed off in the introduction there. They're still going to be in the mix, and it's a more digestible contract if you're giving, let's say, 450 million or 500 million as opposed to 700 million, which is what Otani got from the Dodgers. So, are the Jays going to be used as leverage again? Remains to be seen, but they have a legitimate chance, and I don't know if it makes sense for him to go from the Yankees to the Mets. Like, what's that change all about? So you want to stay in New York, but you're going to the worst to the worser New York team. That to me doesn't make much sense. So I think it's the Yankees, and then it's everybody else. I don't think it's a two-team race. but that makes it a better case scenario for the Blue Jays. The fact that they just have to beat out one team as opposed to three or four other teams, I think that gives them a bit of an advantage heading into free agency, but remains to be seen. A lot of things need to happen this offseason for the Jays to be competitive in 2025, and getting the biggest fish on the market, I think that would definitely be a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest here. He would fit perfect into any team, but he would definitely fit very good into this Jays team and provide them some much needed power from the left-handed side. And again, depending what happens with Vladdy, the first order of business would be to extend Vladimir Guerrero Jr. But you mentioned that Juan Soto and Vladdy have a relationship there. They could, and I mean, there's been no indications yet of where Juan Soto is going to, at least from his camp, of where he's going to sign. We know he's going to test free agency, and the amount of money he's going to get. And obviously, he's been one of the best players we've ever seen. But the amount of money he's going to get is a lot. His projection is 14 years, 560 million within reach for the top free agent. And I mean, at this point, the Jays were obviously willing to give 700 or 6 to 700 million for Juan Soto. But Juan Soto there's a bit, you can justify that easier from ownership's point of view. But at the same time, Juan Soto is a very, very good player, very elite. You can see this here. He has a higher career OPS through his age 25 season, or has a career OPS of 160, sorry, through his age 25 season. Like, we know Bob Nightingale, again, the Blue Jays were given surprising odds to land Juan Soto from Nightingale, or from John Heyman, and now Bob Nightingale said the same thing. So there's just so much going on here. It's very exciting, Peter, but at the same time, I feel like we've been hurt before, and we've played this, we had the exact same rodeo last offseason, but to be in the mix for players like this, at least at these preliminary stages, is at least very exciting, and I do genuinely believe that the Jays, I don't know if they're going to land him, obviously, because the Yankees have a huge leap ahead on the Jays when it comes to, competing over the next handful of seasons, at least for the next couple of years, and he's playing there already, but I love that the Jays are involved in all of these high-end free agents. It's at least a good sign, especially because Ross Atkins came out and said they're trying to compete next season.
Yeah, well, in order to do that, you need to make some major changes to this roster. Like, I love what I've seen out of the young guys, but it's not good enough to compete in 2025. Like, you can't have Ernie Clement as your everyday shortstop or everyday third baseman, wherever he decides to line up. And I love Ernie Clement, but you have a lot of complementary pieces right now. And the one mistake that the Blue Jays can't make this time around is, like Chris Bassett said, to put all of their eggs into the Juan Soto basket, because even though they're in the mix, it's still unlikely. Okay. Now, it's still the Yankees' race to lose.
Yep.
And in order for this not to happen again, in order for them not to be scrambling and have to make some last minute moves, like signing Justin Turner, who's 39 years old, or signing Isaiah Kiner-Falefa above market value, you need to go after other marquee free agents. Now, I know they're not going to be as sexy as Juan Soto, like let's say an Alex Bregman. Maybe that's a name to circle in on if you're Ross Atkins. He fits the profile of what the Blue Jays are trying to do, gets on base, good defensively at third base. So there are other options that you can pivot to. I think this free agent class is much better than the one that we saw last year. And for that reason, yeah, you can be in on Juan Soto, but you got to have it in the back of your mind that it's probably not likely, because he's playing for arguably your biggest rival right now. And it's going to take a lot to pry him out of New York, a situation where he's clearly very comfortable in, where he's having the best season of his career and has lined himself up for a massive payday. So you're taking him away from that situation. It's not going to be easy. And it's, again, probably the Yankees' race to lose. So for that reason, you got to be in on guys like Alex Bregman or anybody else that's a free agent that can make a big impact if you want to be competitive next year. And if that happens, if the Blue Jays manage to get a couple of marquee guys, then maybe that sways Vladdy to signing a massive extension before hitting free agency. Maybe that changes Bo Bichette's point of view, and maybe he wants to stay because he sees the team taking steps to getting better. So you got to constantly build, you got to constantly make this team better. And the Blue Jays have the money to do it, they have the willpower to do it. So it's all about executing now, but you cannot make the same mistake that you did last offseason and trick yourself into the fact that you're getting Shohei Otani, because you ultimately didn't, and then you had to pivot and your team was worse off for it. So yeah, be in on Juan Soto, try your best to get him, but if it doesn't happen, you got to have a backup plan, a backup plan, and then maybe even a fourth or third backup plan. So that's the way that the Blue Jays need to approach this offseason. But it's definitely exciting that they're in on Juan Soto because I can get down with the idea of him hitting in front of Vladimir Guerrero Jr.
Yeah, ultimately they need hitters. They need offense because that's something they've lacked for the past 2 seasons. And you mentioned it, there's going to be a snowball effect no matter what they do. If they get a big free agent, that'll make everyone else in the organization happy, and maybe it attracts other free agents so they can go out and get a couple of different guys. So it's going to be a very exciting offseason, hopefully, if Ross Atkins can make that work. But let us know in the comments what your thoughts are on this. Do you want to see Juan Soto as a Toronto Blue Jay? I'd say most of you are saying yes, but let us know down below. See you soon.